It would help if it were like this. What did we do? Sorry. I'm a little confused about what I just did. Okay, let's try that again. Play. Yeah. Okay. Welcome back, everybody, to Plant Families in Our Foods and Nature Journaling, week 4. As usual, I will show you our 3 pictures of our plants at the beginning, and you can take 2 minutes, if you'd like, to draw this plant in front of us right now. And after our 2 minutes, you'll have an extra minute to write down any words, observations, questions, notes, descriptive words, and numbers that you want to the picture. So let's take 2 minutes starting now. Let's take a few more seconds on our drawings. And please take an extra minute to add any words or numbers to your pictures. Please take about 10 more seconds to add any last words or numbers. Okay, and we will move to our second picture. Once again, let's take 2 minutes to draw our new flower. We'll take about 20 more seconds. And again, don't worry if it's not perfect. It doesn't have to be. And there's our timer. And you can take an extra minute to add any words or numbers to your pictures. Any questions? Take another 10 or so seconds. And that's our time for this flower. And our third and final picture before we talk about our family of the day. And once again, we'll have our 2 minutes. We'll take about 10 more seconds. And there's our timer. And we'll take one last minute to add words, descriptors, questions, and numbers to our picture. Take another 10 seconds. And there's our time. Are you all ready to meet the family of today? Welcome to the pea family. Yay, one of my favorites. So I'm sure that everybody, everybody knows at least one member of this family, and I'm sure we know lots and lots. This is a particularly important family, not only for people, but for plants in general. This is, to my recollection, the third largest plant family in the world. The other two, the two that go above it, are kind of competing for the #1 spot, and we're not really sure which one's winning. The two above it are the orchid family and the sunflower family. But this is the third biggest family of all the families. We call it Fabaceae, and it is named for the genus Faba, which interestingly I learned is defunct, so it doesn't even exist anymore, which kind of breaks our rule that we've previously seen about naming our families after a type genus that sort of exemplifies what the entire family is about. So I found that kind of interesting to know that Faba doesn't exist anymore. Now it's Vicia Faba and some others. And it means bean or broad bean. And the easiest way I think of to remember that is to think of fava bean. So Fabaceae is the bean or pea family. The old name, as we talk about sometimes, is Leguminosae, and that refers to legumes, as you can imagine. This family is all the legumes. And I included a third name. There's a lot of synonyms, but I included this particular one because of the description, the Papilionaceae, which is no longer its own family. It's complicated now. It's one of the sort of subfamily, possibly it's complicated, but it was formerly a name. And that one can be remembered like the French word papillon, which means butterfly. And as you probably have noticed, that can look a lot like a butterfly in some ways, the beautiful wings. So those are a few of the synonyms. We have our basic flower anatomy as usual. We have our stem in our basic anatomy. We have our sepals, the little green things that attach underneath the petals. We have our petals here, our stamens, which make the pollen, and the pistils that make the seeds. So the way that I remember this, as some of you might have heard before, is PSSP. Pistils make seeds, stamens make pollen. And that's how I can remember them. Now, very similar to last week, last week we were studying the Lamiaceae, or the sage family, and they had kind of zygomorphic, bilaterally symmetrical flowers that were in a more tubular form. Now, this isn't quite as much of a tube, but it's very similar, as you can see. We have our flowers that are going a lot of times sideways. There are 5 sepals here. There are 5 petals, and this is the characteristic of the family for the most part. We have banner, wings, and keel in here. And for the most members of that family, that will be the identifier. There's an exception, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And one of the cool things about the keel, this keel here in particular, is that it houses the pistils and the pistil and the stamens. So we have 10 stamens. In this particular specimen, there's kind of like this, I don't know what you would call it. It's some sort of a membrane where all of the stamens are attached to it. Although I've heard that in some cases there might be 9 of them attached and then a loner, but you have to check each flower for that, I think. So in this case, they have a membrane that they all attach to. In other subfamilies of the same family, you might have all of the stamens free, but either way, it's cool to see all of this together. And then you have our one pistil right here. And also, I decided to include a bit about the leaves because there are so many leaves within this family. So you might find it confusing to look at the different leaves and think, how are these even related? You know, how does a leaf that's palmate like this relate to leaves that are pinnate like this? One pattern that I've noticed is that they're almost always compound. So this is pinnate, meaning that you have that on the leaf, the leaflets come off of the same central stalk opposite each other. And I think you can think of it like feather. I think that that's what pinnate relates to, is feathers. This is bipinnate, which is complicated, because then instead of just having, you know, main stem and then leaflet, leaflet, you have main stem, other stem, and then leaflet, 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 leaflet. And believe it or not, it can get even worse than this. There can be tri and quadrupinnate. It's a headache. So these are one example of the leaves, pinnate and bipinnate. Then we have our three-parted leaves, trifoliate. Good example of this one would be clovers, but you'll see that later on. And then we have our palmate compound leaves here, like our lupins. In fact, I'll go back a little bit so you can see a couple of the ones we were talking about earlier. You can't see the flowers on this one, unfortunately, but this here is a lupin, and it has those palmate leaves that I was just showing you. This one here is a pea, and it has leaves that kind of surround the stem in a weird way. And then, of course, this is a pod, as you know. But you can see right here the way that the leaves sort of surround the stem. So the leaves are all sort of different forms, but a lot of the time, not always, but a lot, that they're compound. Are there any questions so far?
I'm not seeing any in the chat yet, Evea.
Okay. So here are the key characteristics of Fabaceae. And if this looks a little bit more complicated than usual, it's because it is. As we talked about, they have 5 sepals. They have 5 petals. They're in the form of a banner, wings, and keel. Actually, you know what? We're going to go back for a second so I can do a bit more justice to this. You see right here on this pea plant, this has this lovely purple, well, lighter purple one here. This is the banner. So it's one petal. And then the 2 that you can see here, this one and then this one over here, these are the wings. In this particular photo, you can't see the keel because the wings are shielding the keel. So they kind of cup it and hide it within it. It's very well hidden. And it's the same, yeah, you can even see here, banner, big old banner right here. And then you can see this is a wing here. And it's hard to tell apart because this is a white flower, but then this should be another wing over here. And tucked up inside is the keel. And the keel are 2 petals that kind of push together, like that kind of come together. And inside of that are our stamens and our pistil. And you can see in here too, a banner, and then our wings, and then hidden inside is the keel. I wanted to mention that because it's difficult sometimes to see. So we have our 10 stamens, we have our 1 pistil, we have oftentimes, not always, but often compound leaves. And of course, this varies very greatly. And the biggest indicator that will help you know if this is Fabaceae or not is the distinctive pea pod fruits. There might be some other plants out there that look similar. Like I know that the broccoli ones can get mixed up because of the way that it's kind of makes a silique. But the pea pod fruits are the way that you'll almost always be able to tell that that's what you're looking at. And the other thing is that a great number of members of this family have nitrogen-fixing bacteria that live in the root nodules. Now, this is significant. A lot of plants can't on their own get, or at least the flowering ones, cannot use atmospheric nitrogen, even though it's plentiful. It's not in a form that they can use. So for this particular family, they have these bacteria, and they house them in the nodes inside of the roots. And the bacteria, they can get the nitrogen out of the atmosphere, and they can make it accessible to the plant. And it's not just the plant, its host plant, that it helps. It's the entire soil. So it can make nitrogen accessible to the entire soil, which is why if you're a gardener, sometimes you'll have companion planting where you'll plant members of this family, the Fabaceae, with other members of other families that need a lot of nitrogen. The key example I'm thinking of is members of the grass family, like corn. So you have our heavy feeders for nitrogen, like the ones you might find in the grass family, and then you have our nitrogen providers, which are here in the Fabaceae. So this winds up being very, very important on a lot of levels, not just to people, but for the environment. And as you see, I included a little star here because there is I think it's a clade, it's a headache. There are a bunch of different subfamilies and clades within Fabaceae, and one of them is one called well, I spelled it wrong. That's unfortunate. That should have another I right there. Mimosioideae, which throws it all out the window, which you'll find out in just a second. And the important thing is to let the plant that's in front of you tell you. So shall we look at Mimosioideae and see what tries
Yeah, we are getting a few good questions. Let's see. So what is on the back of the white pea flower? Sepals or something else?
You're talking about this? These are the sepals. You can't, they're not in front of the banner, but because the sunlight is hitting it in such a way, you can see it right through the petal. So you can see it here too. These are sepals, as are these. Does that answer the question?
That was Sandy who asked it, so keep an eye. And she also asks, do they get nitrogen from air or in the soil? The nitrogen fixing.
The nitrogen fixing bacteria get it from the air, because even in the soil you have a little bit of pore space, so they're able to collect it from whatever air is within the soil, and then they fix it and make it accessible to not only the plants but anything else that lives in the soil.
Great. And yeah, there was just chatting about that phenomenon. Celia was saying how important it is for farming, and that's why farmers often plant peas as cover crops. And I know I plant fava beans and I work them into the soil when they're done just as a cover crop and nitrogen fixing and then enhancing the soil.
Yes.
So
that's
very important.
It is very important. It's super important as a way of like sustainable farming, because otherwise you wind up using a ton of fertilizers that are heavy in nitrogen for that reason, because the soil itself may not have enough, and not all of the fertilizers are built equal, and so it could wind up having more consequences, which is why it's better to have a more natural form. So that's why you might have, like these guys. Although one thing to note is that if you're going to grow legumes as cover crops, it's important to try not to let them go to seed, because then all of the nitrogen goes and gets collected into the seeds, and it makes it so that you have a bit less to give to the soil. So you want it while the nitrogen is still mostly in the foliage. Just as a tip.
And are there any other plant families that do fix nitrogen, or is it just the legumes?
I don't know. I only know about the legumes for certain, but I don't want to say absolutely that there's nothing else. I think that's a really, really good question, and I'd like to learn more about that too.
Yeah.
So
that's a great question. I'm only aware of the legumes myself, but I don't know everything. It's an I wonder. Put it down.
And it's a wonderful I wonder too. I'm going to be wondering that, and I'm going to be looking that up too. So that is an awesome question. Thank you for that. And let's see here. So we have our, Mimosioideae. Anybody, y'all ready to see the exception to the rule? This is the exception. Acacia within Mimosioideae. Does that look a thing like the flowers we've been studying so far? No. No, it does not. Which is why I say that the pea pod-like fruits is the best characteristic that you're going to get to say, oh, hey, this is from this family. Because you might look at this and you'd be like, this is not, but it is. But it is. It's from Mimosioideae. And in case anybody else wants to be confused like I am, apparently, and I don't like that I keep misspelling this. Anyways, Mimosioideae is a clade now within this maybe I didn't spell it wrong. Oh, well, it's confusing me. Within the C. Salpinioideae subfamily within Fabaceae, but it used to be its own subfamily on par with this. And before that, it was its own family entirely, because all of these were their own family entirely. So it's confusing, is all I have to say about that. I blame everybody, all of the lovely botanists who go between genetic testing and just arbitrary decision. No, I'm just kidding. They probably have good reason. But I blame the Cronquist system. I blame the angiosperm phylogeny group and all of the other botanists who I simultaneously love and also am driven up the wall. You don't have to remember any of this because we're not going to talk about acacia today, except for this one slide. But just so you know, this is also fabaceous. Sebe? Yes, Sebe. Okay, so now we can look inside. And I included a couple of flowers, mostly because it was really, really fun to dissect these ones. And you can see, here's our huge banner. Here's one of the wings before I tore off the other, sorry, flower. And then here's half of the keel. So I cut the other half of it off so you could see better. And they are the two petals that kind of come together. And then inside of it, you can see there's this membrane here. It seems that most of the stamens are not separate. They say that sometimes there's one straggler that is, and this one looks the closest to that, but I couldn't really truly find it. Maybe I just wasn't looking well enough. And then up here is our pistil, kind of in the middle of all of these. I know that there's also a huge difference between wild varieties and the varieties that we cultivate, and that the varieties that we cultivate are a bit more self-pollinating than wild varieties. This particular one here is a sweet pea that I got from the store that smells amazing, although I'm not necessarily sure that you can eat them. I've heard that certain ones are very poisonous. That's something that I want to add about this family. Just because we have beans and peas in it doesn't mean that we can go out and eat the wild ones. Some of them require special prep and some of them just shouldn't be eaten at all. An example that comes to mind, I'm not sure all of the details, but I know that when Christopher McCandless, who was an explorer who went up to Alaska and died there, when he died, I heard it was a combination of his body being very starved and also a certain, I don't know if it was a bacteria growing on a wild sort of bean that he ate or the bean itself, but it poisoned him. So a reminder to not go eating wild plants or even necessarily ones that we think are safe domesticated. Because I know that one of the peas that smells so sweet and pretty is poisonous.
We have a question about what part of the flower produces the scent?
I don't know. That's another really good question. It's kind of, yeah, I don't know what produces the scent. It's, to me, it seems like if I just smell the petals, I can smell it. But I don't want to say that that's where the smell comes from because I don't know. But that's a really good question. Another fun thing about this one, it's not so much on this one that I see it, but more on the lupins. Sometimes you'll see a bee coming in to try to get the nectar, and it will sort of push the keel down just a little bit while it's crawling over it. And when that happens, sometimes with the lupins, the stamens are even more together. So suddenly you'll see it emerge and kind of poke the bee in the butt. This entire little wrapping here of stamens and pistil will poke the bee. And I think that that's its way of spreading the pollen so that it can go on to another flower with the pollen on it. But it's really fun. If you ever get a chance, very gently push the keel down for a lupin and then see if you can see the little thing come poking up. I wish I'd gotten a picture of that. So now's the time where people can unmute and shout out, what foods do you think are in Fabaceae?
Peas.
Peas. Yep.
Snow peas.
Snow peas.
Snap peas.
Snap peas.
Heather said she's having lentils for dinner.
Yes.
Dal.
Lentils.
Dal.
Anything else?
Are green beans part of that family?
They are indeed. Yep.
How about kidney beans or soybeans?
Both of them.
What about garbanzo beans?
That one too. Yep.
Huh.
Fava beans.
Oh.
Is there any pea or bean that isn't? Yes, that's a better question.
What about peanuts?
Yes to
Yeah.
peanut.
Oh,
I can't think of any particular peas or beans that wouldn't be, at least not
Yeah,
not that come to my
all of them.
mind. Yeah.
So I had about peanuts, the little side comment in the chat. So everybody knows that George Washington Carver invented peanut butter, but his real cause was to promote the use of pea plants as a cover crop for sustainable agriculture.
oh,
And he invented peanut butter just as a way to use peanuts because he was promoting growing peanuts as a cover crop to stabilize the nitrates and avoid the fertilizers and just to promote better crop yield.
That is really cool. I didn't know that about him.
No, I mean neither till recently. It was actually a talk I attended at the Eco Farm conference about history of Black agriculture.
Well, that sounds like a wonderful class. I'd be interested to hear more about it. Sometime we can talk about that. I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, it was very cool.
Very, very cool. Okay, are you all ready to see our list? So ones that everybody already said, plus a couple extras. So all of the peas, black-eyed pea,
tamarind.
all
Wow.
of the peas, beans, chickpeas, peanuts, carob. Carob is an interesting one, I know. Soy, lentils, tamarind. And the reason why I included indigo and gum arabic as bonuses is because as nature journalers, I know that we tend to think about those things when it comes to our colors and our palettes. So those are also the gum arabic in particular as the binding agent within our paints. So we owe that to Fabaceae, to the bean family. Now, when I look at this list, to me, it feels incomplete, but it's not because we're missing members necessarily, at least in this particular list of the Fabaceae. It's because it feels almost as though the members of this list are missing dance partners. Now, I mentioned earlier that Fabaceae makes nitrogen available, or at least the bacteria do make nitrogen available for other plants in the soil, particularly heavy feeders. Now, that's ecologically something that makes a lot of sense, but it's not a total coincidence either. Think about foods that you often will pair with these. What sorts of things do you think of when you think of eating beans with something?
Rice and
Rice.
corn,
Yes.
the three sisters.
The three sisters. So we have rice and corn, or maybe we have peas and corn. A lot of these things here on this list, or maybe we have lentils and barley. A lot of these things pair really, really well with members of the grass family that we eat, the grains.
What
So
about kale?
rice and barley and corn and let's see here, there's so many others, and wheat.
What about kale?
Oh yeah, kale pairs well with them too, but kale isn't from the grass family though.
Oh.
But kale does pair well with these as well. But a lot of these will pair well with the grass family, and so that's why you'll often find them in cuisines together, not only growing well together in the land, but well together in our bellies. So I just wanted to mention that as well, just in case we don't get to the grass family in this particular.
Did you hear that, sweetie? So those are bean families.
So Heather was saying that also licorice and alfalfa.
Yes, licorice, alfalfa, clovers, vetch. I mentioned the fava beans, which the type that sometimes people can use in the cover crops can be bell beans as well, which have less emphasis on the fruits and more emphasis on the foliage. So yeah, a lot of those as well can be and with licorice, that one I should have included that one. I didn't because I worried people might get mixed up with fennel, but not fennel. A different the other kind of licorice is within this family as well.
So you're saying licorice is of Fabaceae?
Yes, but the licorice that is not a fennel. Fennel's in a different family entirely. So. Sorry. A lot of the ones that I didn't list on here are things that are forage crops too that you'll have the animals eating. So like alfalfa and clover and that kind of thing.
It looks like Michael's been doing his research. He says Cyanothis is another nitrogen fixer.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That is really good to know. Cyanothis isn't in Fabaceae, but good to know that that's a nitrogen fixer too. If I'm remembering rightly, it's in Rhamnaceae. So that's cool. So we have a rhamnaceous member who fixes nitrogen too. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. All right. Are you all ready for the fun part? Are you ready with the poll, Anne? Ready?
Ready.
And it's time to play. If it will ever let me go. Let's play Spot the Fabaceae, round 1.
And if you don't know, the poll is in a window that you can move to the side or minimize when you're done with it.
And when you're guessing, remember, don't worry very much. Like it's not about whether you get it right or wrong. It's about having fun, using observation skills, and learning these families over time takes a really, really long time. So don't worry about it if any of these are difficult. Although I'm seeing that everybody so far is guessing the same one, which is a really, really good sign. Okay. I will give folks another 10 seconds to guess. And we're good. And again, don't worry about the right answer. So here it is. Oh, it's here. Come on, go away. Okay, there. It was B for broom. Not really, but no, this is the Fabaceae member. You can see our huge banner up in here, and you can see our wings, and you can see the keel sort of covered up, and in the very, very slimly in the middle, you can see where the tube of stamens and also pistil are. You can sort of see the stamens peeking out just a little bit on the edges. You also might notice the leaves, that the leaves have kind of a compound look to them. That there are, you have one stem here and then you have the little leaflets out here. In this case, it's trifoliate ones. Now, I'm not sure whether this is French broom or Scotch broom. I'm thinking Scotch broom, but I didn't want to put it just in case. Did anybody notice anything interesting about C?
Oh, it's from last time. Has the 4 petals.
Is it Brassicaceae?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Right.
It's Brassicaceae. So this one is probably either like, I want to say it's either a mustard or maybe a broccoli, one of those. But yeah, this is Brassicaceae. All right, are y'all ready for round 2? Here we go.
What I'm about to show you is going to change it.
A little bit more difficult. I'm not sure what I did with my, I think I misplaced the slide, so I can't tell, or I mean the poll, so I can't tell if people still need more time or not. But I'll give people about 20 more seconds. It's okay, it's my fault. I think I accidentally made it go away and it's fine.
We have 19 respondents.
Okay.
20, 21. People are still going. 22. That's probably it. And boy, we have a variety. So we have
Excellent.
36% are saying it's A. 5%, that's one person, is saying it's B. And 61%, 14 people, are saying it's C.
Okay, are you all ready? And remember, oh cool, I can see it now. And remember, don't worry about the answer. We'll talk about this one. It was A.
Really?
It was. Yes, and I know that must be very confusing. With this one, you can sort of on the edge here see the banner pointing straight up, the wings here on the side, and then right in here, the keel poking out. And here you can see the keel poking out a little bit more. No, wait, unless this is the banner. Yeah, this is the banner. And then I guess the wings are in here and the keel. So it's a little bit harder to see with this one. But the flowers generally sort of point up. Now, this one, I admit, was kind of mean of me because these two here, B and C, there's something a little bit interesting about them. They're both from the exact same family. Does anybody recognize this family?
Is that a lupin?
Not a lupin. Nope. These are both, at least I think this one. I could be wrong about this one, come to think of it, but I know for a fact that this one is from Lamiaceae. So
Yeah,
the family
the
did last
sage.
year.
The
So
sage?
yeah, this is the Jerusalem sage. You can see the lower on this one. And I thought this one was too, but now I'm rethinking it. So I'm thinking this one isn't from, but I know it's not Fabaceous because it doesn't have the keel coming up here or the wings. It has something that looks almost like a banner, but it doesn't have the wings or the keel. So it is this one. And I don't know what kind of vetch this is. There's a lot of different vetches, but this is one that I found growing out close to my restoration site. And I'm still not sure whether it's native or not, so I've been leaving it alone. I know that one was a lot difficult, and I know, and I intentionally included these ones because I would get them mixed up for a really long time, because they all have that really beautiful flowery butterfly type look. So, are you all ready for round number 3?
Yeah.
Here we go. Okay, I'll give folks about 15 more seconds. Okay, are you ready? Here, sorry. It was the third one. The third one are our fava beans. And I included this one because I wanted one that paid homage to the pea pods, although in this case it would be bean pods, but also because this in particular might have caused some confusion. Does anybody know what A is?
Oxalis,
It is, it's oxalis,
sauerkraut,
sauerkraut.
horrible weed.
Yes. A lot of people, for understandable reason, mistake this for a clover, probably because of those leaves that it has, but it's not. And you can tell that it's not because of the flower. Instead, the flower winds up having a more tubular corolla instead of having our banner and our wings and then our keel coming up. So that's why I included this one, is because people mistake it for being in that family, but it's not. This one is in its very own family, Oxalidaceae. And yes, there's an entire family of oxalis for gardeners everywhere who are cringing. This one here in the middle, it also had sort of that, gaping mouth look and that tubular look, but this one is, I believe, a foxglove. Very poisonous. Yeah, I think this one might be a foxglove. But it's not in our member, sadly, it's not in our Fabaceae family member. Although in the background, you can also see the rosemary from last week. But this one here is our fava bean. And I wanted to include that just because, like I said, this is the main characteristic, but you can also sort of see the compound leaves as well. We have our one stems here and then our tons of leaflets coming off of it. That's another really, really good trait of our Fabaceae. Are you ready for round 4? Okay, here we go. Final round.
These are supposed to be bean plants? Oh, yes. Okay. Got it.
I think you're muted, Anne.
Yep, sorry. Jasmine asked whether oxalis also fixes nitrogen. She remembers digging them up and finding nodules in the roots.
I like that question too.
Yeah.
I will want to look that one up as well. So thank you for that, Jasmine. I will definitely be looking that one up. I was silly and I accidentally lost my polls again. Could you please let me know, Anne, how?
We have 20 out of 26.
Okay.
21.
Give folks another 10 seconds.
Yeah, see the oxalis, I don't know if it fixes nitrogen, but I do know that those nodulars are part of why it's such a terrible invasive weed, because if you're pulling it out, if you don't get those stupid little bulbs, it comes back. So it's very hard to control.
One interesting thing I've noticed about the bulbs is that usually the bigger ones are attached to smaller plants. So I think that those bulbs are full of all of the nutrients that it needs to get started. And they oftentimes will leave really tiny little bulblets in the soil afterwards. So it seems like it's an easy plant to grow, to pull out, but it's not, because you have to constantly root in the soil afterwards to get the bulblets out. It's a plant we have to deal with a lot of over at Crissy Field as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Although I have to admit, when I'm giving it to the kids who are in the nearby preschool, they love it. It's
They
sour
call
grass,
it
so I let it grow a little bit more.
sour grass.
Right.
I let it grow in the plot just to make them happy. All right, ready? Here we go. It's the third one, the clover. Now, this one is a little bit difficult to tell, and that's probably why I included it, is because even when we know the patterns, there will still be those flowers that are really difficult to tell, that don't look like what we imagine. You can sort of see the way that it kind of bends up and the way that it has a little keel down here, but it's hard to see it. You can also see that it has these trifoliate leaves in here, little leaflets. But I included it precisely because it's one that you wouldn't necessarily think Fabaceae, because of the flowers that we've been seeing so far. And also because I wanted to show the clear difference between this one and the Oxalis. I think people also like to call Oxalis Shamrock. This one does have a really nice showy banner up in here. I don't know what this one actually is. I just know it's not fabaceous. And again, sometimes processable elimination can be your friend as well. But I do know that it is an ornamental that grows around here. And this one is one of my absolute favorites. We'll be coming back to this one again in a couple of weeks, I think. This one happens to be called Reina de la Noche, or Angel's Trumpet. And if you ever go and stand underneath them at nighttime, they have the most bewitchingly beautiful smell ever. We'll be coming back to the family for this one later.
Oh, those. But aren't they, I think they're toxic for dogs.
Oh, and people too. If you ever try to eat one of these, I'm told that people who eat them begin to crave water to such an extent that they can die in 3 inches
Wow.
of water.
My
These
neighbor
are,
has a beautiful orange one.
you don't ever want to eat these, but they smell really nice. We'll talk about this particular family later on, and it will not be a surprise when you find out what family it comes from.
And Deborah asked whether B was Vinca.
Vinca? Possibly. Like I said, that's one I don't know precisely, so I'm going to look that up because that's a really good question. I'm going to look up Vinca. I'm going to put that in for myself. So maybe a periwinkle, you're thinking? I'm going to look that up in a bit, so thank you. So to recap, for our pea family, we have our 5 sepals in here. Sometimes they can be slightly brought together, slightly fused into a calyx. We have our 5 petals, our banner, our wings, and our keel. We have our 10 stamens here. We have our 1 pistil that matures into a pea pod. Someday I should probably look beyond the membrane and see what the pistil looks like underneath it. They oftentimes have compound leaves, though not always. And as we talked about, they're often nitrogen fixers. And now we're gonna be able to study more nitrogen fixers. So I'm really excited about that. So thank you for joining us this evening. And I think that we are done with this part. So if folks would like, we can talk and share.